And I like your notion that it's the key to the garden rather than the garden itself. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say to me for more years than I can ever remember that, actually getting off is the relatively easier half of the bit of the journey than the staying off. But what strikes me is that we put quite a lot of intensity at times in the getting off the treatment, and it's very intense, of course, when it comes to rehab and stuff. And then somehow there's a lack of intensity afterwards, unless you're talking about something like we've talked about, which can be quite intensive day rehabs or a complicated network of programs or a complicated network of activities and support space, some addiction, some community. But for quite a lot of people, I was literally just doing some interviews the other day. They have an intensity of rehab and then return home alone to a single bedroom flat somewhere, and somehow it's expected to make a go of it from there.
Well, I mean, and that's redoubled. If there used to be a sort of industry of taking people from different countries into rehabs in England, and then returning them to that country where there really wasn't any recovery resource whatsoever. And there was an experiment which was taken up by some people in Middlesbrough to send people to rehab in the south of England, and they raised money to do that, and there was a channel, and they all went back to Middlesbrough, and none of them stayed in recovery at all. So eventually they gave it up, and the reason was exactly that. In those days, which is very different from now, Middlesbrough didn't have a recovering community, didn't have people who could support those folk and help them to continue their journey. Nowadays, Middlesbrough is almost a centre of excellence for recovery. I know people running lived experience recovery organisations in Teesside, and it's as good as you get. So that intensity to being in a way cast out into the non-intensity of the bedsit and so on is a real problem, and was a real problem. I think, and there's different kinds of intensity too, because there's that kind of medical emergency. The addict who's throwing up blood and has got liver ascites, and and is carted off into a kind of emergency room. And there's the intensity, the sort of psychological intensity of some rehabs.
And we should never lose sight of that. I mean, we always forget, and some people don't understand this, which is why I think that the broadened space is much better. You can only recover if you're alive to do so. You returned. Yeah. You mentioned that really early. You've got to stay alive before you can recover.